Greetings. This is Sedley from the West Davidson Public Library, and tonight we have Kevin Winchester with us. Hi, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for partnering with us here at the West Davidson Public Library. Our evening book club was so excited to read Sunflower Dog as our July selection. So I know our book club folks are listening, and we've invited the general public, and I know that you've invited some of your folks to listen. We appreciate everyone that is participating tonight. And what's nice is that once we've recorded this, then people will be able to view it at a later date. But so Sunflower Dog, right?
Yeah.
We are going to have a copy at the West Davidson Public Library, but I'll give a plug to my favorite independent bookstore, Bookmarks in Winston-Salem, which is where I got my book. But first of all, my first question for you, Kevin, is tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Short answer, I teach at Wingate University. I've been doing that for about, this will be my 19th year. So I've been doing that a while. Not an academic by trade. I sort of fell into that late. I've done a lot of different things. Was an auctioneer for years and years. I owned my own auction company for a while, so I did that.
An auctioneer?
Yes, I was an auctioneer. For a long time.
Can you demonstrate?
Yeah, sure. We'll auction off a copy of the book. Start me off at say $175, $50, and now 75, and now 100, now 125. Are you 125 and now 150, now 175, 175 and 100. So there we go.
Holy smokes. That is like a real talent. So I guess if the teaching gig doesn't work out, you've got something to fall back on, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was a fun gig. It was a fun thing. So I did that for several years, from about 1988 until 2000.
Okay.
So 2001. So that's I did that for quite a while. I got my master's, my MFA from Queen's University. Undergrad, I'm actually back at home. I got a BA in English from Wingate University. It was Wingate College then. It was the last year it was a college. So that's it. I've been writing most of my life, writing seriously. I came to that late as well. I started publishing. My short story collection came out in 2006. I published some short stories a couple of years before that. So really just in the last 15, 20 years, I've been seriously working on my writing.
And you teach creative writing as well, correct?
I teach, I have both sides of the spectrum. I teach freshman composition and I teach creative writing. So I get the freshmen and I usually get them again as seniors. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Let's talk a little bit about publishing in a pandemic, because your book came out, I think, in April. Was it
7th,
April?
Yes. It was, yes.
So publishing in a pandemic. Yeah. Tell us a little bit, here at our library, we so much of what we normally do has shifted to the virtual. How has this experience in recent months changed the journey for Sunflower Dog?
Drastically. You mentioned, I'll circle back around, you mentioned Bookmarks. The only event that I got to do for the release was a SIBA, Southern Independent Bookseller Associations. I did an event at Bookmarks on March 13th, which was, I think, the day the announcement came out with the stay-at-home order. And that was the only thing I had planned for the whole schedule that I actually got to do. Everything else was canceled. I had bookstore dates. All those obviously were canceled. Several readings, the release party. So basically everything that we had planned was shelved. And I had to figure out some virtual things to do. And most of those have been exactly like this. I'm doing a couple of book clubs. I have some of those that, and I really like those. I've got the one I'm doing now. They broke it up and I agreed to do this. We meet on Wednesday afternoons and they're taking it, I think it's 3 chapters at a time. So,
that's neat. So they're doing it like
Yeah. It's their summer read. They usually do more in the winter months during school, but for summer read, they
Hmm.
just pick one book. And I said, oh, um, it's relatively easy for me to just kind of drop in. Nobody can do anything. I'm still sitting at home, so
That's
doing
true.
that,
Yeah.
and just some other live events. Not too far from you folks. Boone Saloon and Get Lit Boone, which is a great organization. Those guys up there, they do a live event now. They used to have readings about once a quarter or once every 2 months, where they would have live readings at the Boone Saloon. Downtown Boone, it's a really neat little place. And we had booked that as well. But they converted pretty quickly, and we got back in. I was able to do a live reading with them instead of that. So that's really what it's been. It's changed a lot. We're planning on doing some things again, hopefully in the fall. The target right now is to start about mid or maybe late September and do a relaunch of sorts. And hopefully,
Hmm.
everybody wear a mask so we can get back out there.
Yes.
The,
Hmm.
the, the toughest thing is I hear from people talking about the book, and I really wish I could, be out there and talk to people. So that's the hardest thing.
It's tough for us at the library too.
Yeah.
It's making that shift. But on the flip side, we've been able to reach so many more people virtually, and that's why I thought it was such an exciting opportunity when you guys
Yeah.
reached out to us. So we definitely jumped on it. Um, so you talked a little bit about your writing history. The last 15 years you've been serious. Were you a
Yeah.
writer as a kid?
Yeah, yeah, I've always written. There was never really I can't remember a point in time when I was not writing. My mom still has things in a box that I think she keeps trying to pawn off on me to make more room that I wrote very young. Um, I somehow in the seventh grade, and I have this here in the seventh grade, we were supposed to do a poetry notebook where we collected different poems, and I somehow managed to convince my seventh grade English teacher, Mrs. White, to let me write my own poetry. So it's been, yeah, it's
Oh,
always been there. Yeah.
that's super sweet. That's super sweet. So, so Sunflower Dog, where did you get the idea for Sunflower Dog?
Well, the opening scene, I witnessed the opening scene. I ride a motorcycle. I was on the motorcycle coming back from work, and Wingate University, I live in a little town called Waxhaw. Wingate University, I'm about 14, 15 miles from there. I have to go through the town of Monroe to get there. They were doing a lot of road construction on Franklin Street, sort of the main street through downtown to go across town. So one day I was coming home. It was in the fall, but it was early fall, and you know how that is in North Carolina, especially down here in the Piedmont. It was still miserably hot. And I knew that there was construction and I got caught and was going to have to stop. And I was on the motorcycle. So I sort of pulled to the edge of the road, side of the road, and got under a shade tree because I knew it was going to be about a 15-minute wait. And when I stopped, I was right in front of Davis Funeral Home. And it's sort of up a hill from where I was sitting. And I heard a commotion, heard people yelling, and I looked. And that opening scene of the book where the two ladies are having a fight in the parking lot, that's what started it. I mean, that was
That was real.
oh yeah, that was real. And I'm sitting there thinking there's a story. There's a story there. There's something there. And I went home and I
So
wrote out that scene immediately.
like you
So that
literally
was
cannot
it. I
make
mean,
this
that
stuff
was
up.
nope, nope, nope. And that I had the one other piece, which chapter 4, the very first part of chapter 4, where I introduced Livingston, that character. I had that piece as a short story that never worked.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't quite figure it out. I couldn't get the ending right. Had several people read it. I got great rejections on the short story, and everybody said the same thing. Great story, but the ending's not right. So I had the momentum going for this story, and then as happens, I got to that point about 35 or 40 pages in, and I'm like, okay, where's this going? I didn't really know what I had. I was still trying to tell that initial story. And I thought, well, let's just bring in another character. So I brought him in from another project, and it's nothing at all like the short story was. But yeah, so it started with that first scene, and that was the thing that I want to know what the story is.
The cat fight at the funeral home.
Yeah, yeah, and mainly the guy. It's Salvador Henson is I think the main character, and it's his story. And he was stuck between these two women, and just the look on his face, you could tell he did not want to be there. He wanted no part of whatever was going on, and the two of them were just swinging at each other, and he was trying to help the ushers, keep them apart. And then they turned on him and started yelling at him, and I'm like, this poor guy, I got to know his story. So, that was it. Was just trying to figure it out.
Well, I can tell you, as I read it, I literally laughed out loud. I don't know how many times. I thought it was, I thought it was interesting. It made me think of like the movie Fargo.
I'm a big fan of that movie.
Yeah, so it made me think of like kind of deadpan comedy. I don't know. Like the characters were funny, but in a very unintentional way.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I did think it was interesting how you introduced each character separately, but as the story unfolded, their lives started to intersect. As a reader, I was constantly surprised at the connections. It seemed like that took an awful lot of planning. So how did you plan that out from beginning to end, or did it just happen naturally?
It just, I envy writers who can write from an outline, and I can't. I cannot. I never knew where the story was going, and I didn't know what the ending was. And these characters kept popping in my head. And so the way I wrote it, I would write for a while, and then I would be working with one character, and I would that voice from another character. So I would just stop writing this one and then go write the other character. So it sort of flowed, had a natural unfolding. So there was a little bit of flow there, and I made some of the initial connections in the first draft, but I did have to go back and sort of highlight those and make them a little more clear. Because sometimes I would just go through and I would write a character, I would write a scene. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, why does this have to be just a random character? I can take James and put him in, yeah, and use it that way. So it was about half and half. That part of it just serendipity. They sort of fell into place, and the others came out of the revision process. It took me a long time to write the book, so not the draft. I drafted it relatively quickly. The first complete draft took me about 14 months, and then I revised for a long time. It was. I first started this in, I think, 2012. So it was 7 years from the time that I started before I found a publisher for it. And
well, two of our book club folks, Crystal, she's always sharing. I hope, am I reverbing? I think, is it just me?
You're great on my side.
Okay. Crystal is one of our book club members, and she is always sharing funny stories. And she's like, these things happen in my life too. So like the fist fight at the funeral home. Every book club she's always sharing some funny stories. And Lisa is also in our book club, and she's got a question for you. Who is your favorite character in the book, and why?
See, everybody always asks me that, and it actually changes. The answer I give the most frequently is probably Ethel. I, Ethel is I'm the product of a lot of strong women, and
Uh-huh.
my wife included. And I hope that sort of comes through in each of the female characters in the book, but especially Ethel. I mean, she's just, I really I like her approach. And she's not had an easy life, but she still is, she's still very kind hearted. So I like her. And the other is, I like James. And when I first started the first 30 or 40 pages, I thought James was going to be the antagonist. I did not like him when I started. So those two, even though it's Sally's story, uh, Sally's a little too familiar for me. So it's same relative age and a lot of the same issues. So I like him, but I tend to not look at him in the same way I do Ethel and James. This is a good question. And for Crystal, yeah, it's, I mean,
Gotcha.
Every village has one, and when I go to that village, the one finds me. It's the story of my life. I don't know. I don't know.
Angela is also in our book club, and she said she found it interesting how you incorporated other characters into a scene section to show a connection between the characters. Did you learn this, or did you see this in another author's writing, and use it in your writing? And if so, do you remember who?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a very good question. And it's a topic that I touch on when I teach as well, is how you kind of figure things out. And then I always infuriate my students because I say that here's what you need. You only need two things to become a writer and be a writer. And that is, number one, you got to read a lot, and you've got to read a lot of material, and you got to write a lot. So there's all those different influences from my reading kind of play into this. But what I find myself being drawn to are these kind of plots where we have, characters move back and forth, and several writers do it. Confederacy of Dunces was one that happened several years ago. There, in a odd way, the first time that I realized the different characters, the level, was As I Lay Dying by Faulkner. And I read that years and years ago, and I'm like, oh, this is so neat, the way all these different characters kind of come in, you're telling the different story. So I like that, but to be specific about this book, I was struggling with the pacing and how to move the characters about. And I'm a huge fan of libraries. My mom, when I was so young, my mom would just turn us loose in the summer. We went to the library every 3 weeks, and I would come out with an armload of books, and she would turn us loose, never censored us. So, and my office is in the library at the university, so work really closely with those folks. And Greta Wood, who was a reference librarian at the time, they used to have a Baker and Taylor rack in the library where they would bring in popular books, the same thing that you would see in the public library. And she had helped, her and Amy Odom and Ashley Sheely, all librarians, had helped with the research on several things in the book. And she knew I was kind of struggling with that. She said, you need to read this book. And the name of the book was Nuclear Jellyfish. It was by Tim Dorsey. And when I read that, I'm like, yes, this is, I've got to figure out how this guy does this, because he does the same thing where those characters cross paths. And it's a series, and it has, I have to say this because I teach at the university level, it has zero literary merit, and it has tons of at the same time.
Well,
but I learned, I like it, and that's what I did. I read everything in the series to figure out how it was doing.
Well, as a librarian, I could tell you there's a lot of books on our shelves that don't necessarily have literary merit.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter as long as as long as it gets to you and it gets you reading, then that's fine with us. So
that's right.
Getting the get rich quick was a recurring theme in Sunflower Dog. whether it was real estate deals or whatever. But two of you, oh, and the survivor character, but two of your characters had plans to make it big with a big cash crop.
Yeah.
How much research did you have to do to make that storyline convincing? Not to give it away.
A lot. Yeah, a lot. It's again back to the libraries. In doing the research, one thing that has happened with the legalization of that cash crop in a lot of the area of the country, a lot more source material has come out, and you get information on, all right, here's how, the grow systems and everything else. That the whole thing for the indoor setup of the grow lights and everything else in the hotel room, it's just really easy research, because now in most of the
Now it's
states that have
mainstream.
legalized marijuana, it is, and individuals can grow. So there's instructions all over the place. So I first I did that to get the technical aspect of it, and then I'm a child of the '70s, so just channeled all that to get the tone right. So and the kind of
Well,
married the two. Yeah,
I'm a child of the '80s. I'm just glad there's no Instagram from then.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, and the following off the research question, do you have a green thumb?
I do. Yeah. I have. That's one of my hobbies. I guess it's a hobby. I have a large garden, and I mean, corn, beans, tomatoes, okra, cucumbers, squash. I mean, um, yeah. So that kind of occupies my summer, and it's a good time. I grow. I just enjoy being on a tractor and working in the dirt and everything else. I like growing stuff, and that's my background. We always had a garden, and my grandparents, I mean, large, not commercial farms, but a large family or community farm, raised cows, chickens, pigs, the whole thing.
So where's
So
your
I'm used to
hometown?
it. I was born in Monroe, actually, and I'm back in Union County now. I live in Waxhaw. My grandparents, one maternal grandparents, lived in Waxhaw, and that's where I lived for the first part of my life. My other grandparents live really. I'm only about 2 miles from that home place. I'm actually living on ground that was in my family hundreds of years ago. So I'm back in a little community called Mineral Springs.
Lisa wants to know, did the background of the sunflower, the particular sunflower, do you grow that?
No, that
Okay,
here's
cool.
the thing. That's actually, yeah, it's a really cool sunflower, and it's actually an endangered. It's a rare sunflower, and it's a protected species. The way I came to that, all these pieces I was trying to put things together. And I mentioned my grandparents that grew up in Waxhaw. From the time that I was young, I was still that age, Sunday afternoon ride when I was still living at home with my parents, we'd go to Waxhaw to see my grandparents. And the highway between where I grew up and Waxhaw is Highway 75, which comes up in the book. I was always fascinated because there were signs on the side of the road in certain sections that said, "Do not mow." And I never knew why, but they always intrigued me why they would stop and not mow in one particular section. So as I got older in high school and started doing research, I was just curious about it, and found out that it's one of the few places that the Swinett sunflower still grows. And they've had a hard time cultivating or trying to get it to grow. There's not been a lot of success trying to reestablish it. And there are several growths around here, so they don't mow them. If they mow them, it dies out. So yeah, not able to grow it. It's protected, so you can't cut it or anything like that. So it's an interesting flower.
Ginger has a question, and she's in our book club, but she also works at our library too. How many of your characters are based on real people in your life, and have any of these people recognized themselves in your book?
Um, Yeah, in one way or another, probably all of them. It's a great thing about being Southern, is that we take our crazy and sit it on the front porch. So, it's a wave to the neighbors. Um, so yeah, I mean, I know most of them actually are composites of several different people, where I just sort of, I kind of put the pieces together and I say, oh, okay, how would this person act? That's where I start. The characters all become, as I worked on it, they became very distinct, and they lost whatever connection I normally had. Every single one of them they're nothing like where I started out, but it had enough to get me started, and I do base them on some things there. Um, the the I'm reading her question. It hasn't happened yet, because, and I'm afraid the reason it hasn't happened yet is simply because of the pandemic, and I'm not out.
Yeah.
Because when the short story collection came out a couple of years ago, two things happened. I'll tell you a real quick side story about that. One, there was one character in there in particular who was just not a very bright character. I mean, bless his heart, in the truest sense of the Southern term, bless his heart. And the guy read the story, and he came up to me, and it was based on him. I mean, that was where I drew everything. And he's like, this guy here just doesn't have a clue.
Oh no.
And I'm just standing there saying, no, he doesn't. He really, really doesn't. That was the one. And then another,
So he didn't even recognize himself.
did not.
Oh.
Now, I'll give you the other side of the story is another version. The same coin, different side. I was giving a book club talk. They invited me out, and it was for the short story collection. And it was back in Union County. So I was just back in this area right after the book came out. So it was a local book club. And I knew a few of the people, but a lot of them I didn't recognize. I'd kind of moved away and moved back. And I knew a couple of the people, most of them I didn't. So as we go through the story, and there's one particular girl in one of the short stories, and this one lady kept asking questions, and the more she asked questions about that short story and that character, the more uncomfortable I got. And finally she said, did you base this on anybody that you knew growing up in your neighborhood? And she was very specific. And I'm like, yes. And then she started laughing. She says, I'm Peggy. And I'm like, no, you're not. That was not the name of the story. But when she said, I'm Peggy, that was exactly who it was. That was exactly who I based it on. And
so
she loved it.
Was it flattering or no?
Yes, yes. It was yes.
It was flattering.
Okay. She was older than I was by about 5 or 6 years, and I'd had a terrible crush on her when I was like 11. So I'd drawn on that. Oh. So she was extremely flattered, yeah. But I was terrified, because at that point I knew she's figured this out. I had no idea it was actually her. So yeah, it's happened twice.
Oh my goodness. So I don't want to spoil the ending, but do you have a particular favorite passage that you would like to read to us?
Sure. I mentioned Ethel as I think she's my favorite character. So let me read. I got a couple. Let me find something that's short that captures Ethel. Let's see where to start. All right, here's one that's about. Yeah, I can do this in relatively quick. This is a section where Ethel first thinks that something's up. All right, she's thinking, all right, there's something going on. There are too many pieces that are starting to kind of come together. So this is, I have no idea what chapter, probably 7, 8, 9, somewhere along in there.
Okay.
All right, so here we go, about a page and a half. James turned to leave. Colton had slipped away when Brittany's grandmother started talking. and now waited in the truck, engine running. James paused before climbing in the passenger side. "I'll see you tomorrow for Sunday dinner," he yelled and closed the door. Ethel watched the truck turn around in her side yard and start down the drive. "Sunday dinner. You'll be damn lucky if I don't poison your sorry ass," she mumbled to the taillights. Nap time, but her mind was troubled and she didn't think she'd go to sleep. She sat in the rocker and stared out the window. Something was up with that boy. Color one seemed nice enough, but not James. Brittany could do better. That girl had a good head on her shoulders. Ethel wished she wouldn't watch all those trashy reality TV shows, though. She tried to get her interested in Wheel of Fortune, but Brittany had said it was boring. Ethel had to admit there wasn't much to choose from when it came to television these days. If it wasn't a fake reality program, it was one of those crime shows, and they were just gruesome. Or the doctor and hospital dramas. Those were even worse. Ethel finally stopped looking at those programs. Whatever symptoms the TV patients had, she'd lie awake that night trying to determine if she had the same, which usually meant she had to fix one more rum and coke to help her fall asleep. At least Brittany didn't like those shows either, which was a good thing. But there was something more than James on her mind. It wasn't so much that he was back there in the woods, even though she knew his reasons were no good. Ethel sat and rocked and sat, rolling things around her head. That land seemed to be drawing a lot of attention lately. Sure, Britt walked back there to take her pictures, but she'd done that for years. But now James and that friend of his started going back there. All of a sudden, too. It started when the man and the heavy woman came strolling up from out of the trees. They weren't a bit more lost than she was, and I've been living here since we built this house in '53, she thought. And Salvador Henson appearing out of the blue like he did, asking questions about the property. That fancy talking lady professor from the college. Ethel didn't doubt it would only be a matter of time before she came back and started traipsing around. Something was going on, and it all circled around that piece of dirt behind her house. Fine, she decided. Ethel Combs didn't tell the DMV where they could stick their eye exam without reason. There wasn't a thing wrong with her vision. She could see, and Ethel Combs hadn't made it this far. Didn't raise 3 ungrateful kids on her own without being able to figure out a thing or two along the way. And she'd figure this out too. Yes, the picture was fuzzy, but coming into focus. She'd soon have it framed and hung.
Yeah, Ethel is definitely. So we have a copy of Sunflower Dog, and I got my copy from Bookmarks. Where can folks find copies of your book?
Bookmarks is great. They've been very supportive. Jamie and everybody over there is great. One of my favorite bookstores. So yeah, obviously Bookmarks. Another that's sort of in your area, Scuppernong Books, and they've been carrying it, so they're great as well. You can pick it up there. Quail Ridge has it if you're all the way around Raleigh. Foggy Pine in Boone, I mentioned that earlier. Foggy Pine has it. If any of the Charlotte folks down this way, Main Street Books in Davidson and Park Road Books in Charlotte are both carrying it. A big supporter of indie bookstores, so if one of those is not close to you, they can order it and ship it to you, or go to IndieBound and you can find your closest. Most of the bookstores in the Southeast, if they don't have it, they're willing to order it. The Kindle version is available. You can get that on the big store and all that sort of stuff. And of course you can buy if you are a Amazon fan, and you can buy it there. So Barnes and Noble, Target.
Well, I know that a bunch of our
indie if it
go independent if you can. Yeah. Yes, I know a lot of our book club folks got it on Kindle, and I got my copy from Bookmarks because I just love being able to support them. But definitely check your independent bookstore first. Be a little patient, and because they don't do 2-day shipping. But I think it's important, especially in this time of a pandemic, to support our authors and support our independent bookstores and our libraries. So,
absolutely.
Well, that's great. I think that's all the questions from our folks. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's just thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun, great questions. Thank you for picking up the book and the book club, reading it and everything else. Feel free, you can find me. I'm all over social media. Most book-related stuff is on Facebook. I have an Instagram. They're all the same. Kevin Winchester Writer. All of them are the same. I do have an Instagram, but Instagram is very rarely book stuff. I usually post pictures of gardening, farming, cows, chickens, hiking. That's usually the Instagram stuff. Go to the website, sign up for the newsletter if you want, which I publish every so often.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
and if you like the book, yeah, and if you like the book, just tell somebody, tell a friend, write a review. If you get it from a bookstore, to let the bookstore know, hey, I appreciate it. It's a good book. Just recommend it to somebody else. That's the one thing that has really been out front in the pandemic is you have to get people talking about it, because you can't say this. If you didn't like it, call the library, the local school system, and tell them you want to put it on the banned book list, and then let me know, and I'll make sure everybody in the country knows that it's the banned book list. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Just
that's
spell the
awesome.
name
Tell
right.
people they can't read it, and they'll go out there and do it, right? Well,
Yeah.
so
Can we see music? I got to answer this question.
okay.
I'll make this plug. All right. Can you see music? Yeah. There's the music stuff I'm most proud of is the Flatland Tourist, which it's an Americana band. And if you go to YouTube, there's Flatland Tourist stuff everywhere. And I'm the primary writer for that band. So most of the stuff is there. I've got some solo stuff I don't sing so well. But yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, the music stuff. Flatland Tourist all over YouTube. I've got some. You can find my stuff on YouTube as well. But I write all the Flatland Tourist stuff too. So, yeah, thanks.
So you're a songwriter, a musician, and a gardener, and an author, and an educator. Just an all around Renaissance man.
Well, it's like this. My brother is also a musician, and my sister worked one of those nurse things where you work 24 hours and you're off for a week. And my dad is traditional Southern, in his roots. So you can say all those things, but my dad says none of my three kids have a real job. So there you go.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know our book club and our listeners have really appreciated this. Definitely, if you have any further questions, follow Kevin Winchester Writer.
Yep.
His page, and drop him some comments, and maybe we can drop some of those YouTube links in the comments below as well. So
sure, yeah, I don't know if I can do that, but I'll try.
Oh, we can do that after. Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, okay,
after.
cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Well, thanks so much, Kevin, and our book club thanks you, and I appreciate it. All right, you take care.
Thanks much. It was fun.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.